All right. Hello, everyone, and good evening. Good evening, and hello. We are officially live on the Facebook page of the North Carolina Association of Educators, the state's largest public school staff union in the state of North Carolina. So we are waiting just a few moments for people to tune in, log in, show up in our space because we're doing a very important Facebook Live this evening around the movement uh, that we are seeing in our North Carolina General Assembly regarding private school vouchers. So, yes, welcome this evening. Welcome to the North Carolina Association of Educators Facebook page. So we are going to go ahead and get started. But you can like this video, you can share it in your spaces, you can share on your own Facebook page, or also if you are watching us on YouTube, you can also share it as well. So for those of you who do not know, my name is Tamika Walker Kelly. I'm an elementary music teacher from Fayetteville, North Carolina, and serving as the proud president of NCAE, which again is the largest public school union for public school employees here in the state. And tonight we're talking about private school vouchers and the North Carolina General Assembly. To give you all an update, this week, the North Carolina General Assembly, also known as the NCGA, convened this week to take up legislation, particularly notable around private school vouchers. So we heard rumblings late last week that the North Carolina General Assembly House and Senate leaders came to an agreement to spend an additional $463 million on private school vouchers. Now, previously, we had heard earlier during this year that the House leadership wouldn't agree to additional voucher spending if there were not teacher raises in that budget. However, it seems like the House leadership caved, changed their mind, were persuaded to move private school vouchers. So we will see what they got in exchange for not including teacher raises in this mini budget. But the talk that we continue to hear is that from House leadership and Senate leadership, is that they are doing this to clear the waiting list for vouchers. But the waiting list itself is a manufactured reason for them to divert our public dollars from our public schools. So let's talk a little bit more about this waiting list. And if you are just joining us, I'm glad that you are here. We're talking about private school voucher expansion in North Carolina, in which the Senate leadership voted to add an additional $463 million to private school vouchers. So we're talking about the waiting list. Now, the waiting list exists because they expanded people who could be eligible for private school vouchers. So it doesn't matter if you came from a low income family, if you were a millionaire, a billionaire, or anywhere in between, or if you already have kids enrolled in private school, you now have access to a private school voucher. So what this means is that public taxpayers, us, the general public, taxpayers in North Carolina, are now paying, subsidizing rich kids' tuition. That's what we're doing. We're paying for these students who are already enrolled in private school. We're paying for their private school tuition. There were voucher income limits to voucher eligibility. And when those were existing, the state had money left over. They couldn't give away all the voucher money they had allocated in previous budgets. It was only when they opened up the income eligibility to all families regardless of income, did they see this demand magically increase for private school vouchers? But one of the other reasons that we don't talk about a lot, and thank you all who are joining this call this evening, our Facebook Live this evening. Hi, welcome. The other reason why we've seen this manufactured demand for private school vouchers is because the legislative body itself spent $1 million to give an organization called Parents for Educational Freedom. They gave them $1 million of our taxpayer dollars to promote private school vouchers. So what would happen if we gave the Department of Public Instruction, or we allotted different organizations $1 million to promote public schools? That is a great question we should be asking our legislators. So the legislators in the North Carolina General Assembly seem so eager and desperate to fix this wait list, but there are many more wait lists that exist across our state that would benefit public school students and their families and our communities. For example, our North Carolina pre-K program has a wait list right now where at-risk 4-year-olds in many counties have been on this wait list for years, trying to get access to high-quality pre-K education and programming. We have almost 18,000 people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities who are on the state wait list for healthcare services. And yet, we have not seen an outcry from state leadership to clear that wait list at all. So how does this voucher legislation show up in our North Carolina General Assembly? So this week, our legislators are reconvening in Raleigh to hear about House Bill 10. Now, originally, House Bill 10 was a bill that would force county sheriffs to cooperate with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office, also known as ICE. And this particular bill has been opposed by many immigrant rights advocate groups. But what happened is that they inserted this voucher language into House Bill 10. They also inserted a couple of other provisions to include additional money for Medicaid, which is a plus, K-12 and community college enrollment growth, and economic development. So we've seen this process happen in North Carolina General Assembly multiple times, is where you have a bill, it's called something else, the original language is gutted, and then something else is put in. In this case, HB10, the original language did stay, but then it was added. The voucher legislation was added into House Bill 10. And so earlier afternoon, the Senate was the first part of our legislative chamber to take up House Bill 10, and the Senate voted in favor of House Bill 10, 27-17. 27 in favor, 17 against. We know that the House votes will be coming up this week. It could happen as early as tomorrow or on Wednesday. So our first call of action for everyone watching this Facebook Live is to call your state representative this evening. So we have someone that's going to drop a link in our live feed comments, but we want you to call your representative in this evening in the House and in the Senate. That is really important because they need to hear that you are opposed to our public dollars going to private, unaccountable entities. And it doesn't matter if you reach the voicemail, leave a voicemail. As a voting constituent, you need to say your name, your county, and that you are calling to voice your opposition to private school vouchers and that you want that money invested in our public schools. The other thing that we are hoping is that, of course, we hope that Governor Cooper will veto HB 10. And then if that happens, then we will have a few more days in order to continue to put pressure on legislators to not adopt this into our budget, into our language. Another thing that we want you to do as a watcher, as an educator, as a community ally, as a public school employee, is that we are running ads in districts of legislators. And so we are going to put that link here and links back. We have our ad on our Facebook page, and you can visit our Facebook page. We're going to put that here because what we want you to do is also share that with people who might not be paying attention to what's happening in the General Assembly, but we want them to know the dangers of this legislation coming to fruition and how it strips money from our public schools. And why should you care? So this bill spends more than $400 million this year, $400 million, and ultimately spends more than $4 billion over the next decade for private schools. Now, could you imagine what your public school could do with $4 billion? How could we support our public school students with over $4 billion? You should drop some of those ideas in the comments below. What could we be spending money on in public schools that would benefit public school students and educators? But what this also means is with that loss of money to our public school districts, it means that we will see even more higher class sizes, fewer school nurses, less school bus drivers, and other educators to provide one-on-one attention to our students. Now, you know, at the beginning of this school year, and we're still considered at the beginning of the school year, you know how important our school bus drivers have been and what it means when we don't have enough school bus drivers to run routes, right? We know it means fewer after school programs for our students. It means less money for well-deserved educator raises across the board and more vacant positions in our schools. Many of you could name right now how many vacancies your schools might have because there's not enough funds to recruit the best and the brightest to our state here in North Carolina. Now, while the majority of North Carolinians believe in the value of our public schools, this plan to increase private school vouchers by over $400 million undermines the work and the support of our public schools. Many of you could probably tag people in the comments right now who have left teaching in North Carolina to go to higher paying states like Virginia or South Carolina. And what we risk is seeing the academic progress of our students, because we need highly qualified educators in our classroom, falling behind our peers in the Southeast and across the nation. And we know that our students deserve much, much more better. They deserve much better than this. And I want you to know, in case you want to know why NCAE is opposed to private school vouchers, you can visit our website at ncae.org to read our policy statement on private school vouchers and how we know that we want our public dollars to go to our public schools. Now, no matter what happens this week, one of the things that I want our educators to remember is that we are only 57 days away from Election Day. And Election Day is when we get to decide the future of public schools in our state. We, as educators, as community members, as parents, as caregivers, as people who love and respect our public schools, we get to have our say at the ballot box. So we are going to talk about more opportunities to get out the vote, to educate people about pro-public education candidates, and We want you to join us on our member call next Tuesday at 6 o'clock p.m. so that we can talk about what we need to do in this critical election for public education. I don't know if you haven't heard, but public education is on the ballot this year. And it's going to take all of us out with our Apple cards, talking to our family, our friends, the people who like us and the people who don't, to talk about how important it is that we have a North Carolina government that is invested in our public schools. Thank you so much for joining me tonight to talk about the impending voucher legislation, but also to talk about what you can do to make your voice heard, to state your opposition to private school vouchers. Please remember that to share this video in your educational spaces, to share it with a family, a friend, or somebody who needs to be educated, and to continue to talk about the dangers of not investing in our public schools, because when we don't do that, we are not investing in the children of North Carolina. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and look forward to our email for our NCAE members to join me on a call next Tuesday. Thank you all and have a good evening.